The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Yesterday, I laid out the current status of the Democratic primary. I really didn't think I said anything particularly controversial, and people really flipped out on me. And I'm going to show you some of the comments I received in a little bit. First, there were a few Hillary supporters who emailed me after I laid out sort of the math of the current Democratic primary yesterday and said, David, you're way too pro-Bernie. I had 3 or 4 emails saying I just can't take it. Now, those were outliers. The overwhelming majority of people who emailed me yesterday or commented on YouTube said, David, I can't take your anti-Bernie bias anymore, saying that it's unlikely he will be the nominee or that the math is not in his favor. You're out of your mind. So I think it makes sense, Louis, at this point to really go through and spend a little bit of time explaining why the problem is not my presentation of the Democratic primary. And I am not, by being what I will show you is just realistic about the numbers, I am not going to cause Bernie to lose. And the rage from some of the Bernie supporters, and remember, I'm a Bernie supporter. I voted for Bernie in Massachusetts. I think it's misplaced, and it's starting to really concern me in terms of the election, more broadly speaking, in November.
Well, there are a couple issues that I want to touch on. I'm going to do that after we go through the numbers and after we go over some of the comments we've received. So I'll wait a little.
So currently, Hillary Clinton, 1,446 delegates. She needs 937 more to clinch the Democratic nomination. That's 56% of the delegates that remain. Bernie Sanders has 1,200 delegates, and he needs 1,183 to reach that magic number, 2,383. That is 70.9% of the delegates remaining. So the next question, if we're going to do a sort of sober and fact-based analysis of where this primary is, would be what do the upcoming big primaries look like, and how is Bernie Sanders doing? How is Hillary Clinton doing in those primaries? So upcoming, some of the bigger states that we have polling data for, and I'll make clear that some of the smaller states that aren't very many delegates, there is no recent, or in some cases, there's barely any polling data at all, but those little states are unlikely to really make a difference. So we'll look at the big states. For example, we have Connecticut upcoming. The most recent polling we have in Connecticut, which is 70 delegates, has Hillary at 50 and Bernie at 43. Now, that leaves 7% not in that poll. Even if they go to Bernie Sanders and it's 50-50, that does not get Bernie Sanders any closer to the nomination. We have Maryland with 118 delegates, where Hillary is ahead 57-36 at last poll. Pennsylvania, 120 delegates, Hillary Clinton up 51-39. And California with 546 delegates available. Most recent polling, Clinton 50, Bernie 40. Of course, that does not include 10% that are undecided or supporting someone else who presumably mostly will go with either Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders by the day of the California primary. So looking just at the numbers, the polling for Bernie Sanders does not go anywhere close to the 70.9% that he needs. Now, one devil's advocate argument would be, well, he doesn't need 70.9% of the vote to get 70.9% of the delegates based on how some counties allocate delegates. That's true, but 52% of the vote is not going to get him 71% of the delegates. So, Louis, before we go into the comments and some of the cases being made by Bernie supporters, of which I am one, is your assessment of the data the same as mine, or is there something that's missing from our assessment, be it something about superdelegates or something about some other factor I'm not including here?
No, I would say that Bernie does have a tendency to outperform the polls. And so even if he outperforms every poll we're seeing here by 5 points or even slightly more, that still is not going to get him what he needs. So I guess I'm with you on these numbers and your estimations.
Okay, so now, the Bernie winning scenario, Bernie winning before the convention scenario, I consider not likely based on the math. This is not my opinion in terms of what I would like to have happen. This is just, if I look at the data, it doesn't seem likely. The scenario that is more likely is Hillary Clinton not clinching. As I mentioned, Hillary Clinton needs 56% of the remaining delegates, and it is certainly possible if Bernie Sanders can get 47, 48% of the remaining delegates, that while he doesn't secure the nomination before the convention, he prevents Hillary from doing so, and that would certainly give him more clout when we get to the convention. Now let's get to the feedback that we got from Bernie supporters. Let's put this list up, Lewis, and then we'll break some of these down one by one. Here are some comments here that I received from Bernie supporters. This is one of the main reasons I don't watch your stuff as much anymore. Unlike the Young Turks and Secular Talk, you hardly cover Bernie, you hardly root for him, and these depressing videos make me want to unfollow you honestly. Sorry, but it's Bernie or bust, end of story. Another comment, people are mad at you because you seem okay with this. Another comment, Bernie did better in New York than Obama did against Hillary, and Obama eventually was the nominee, and stop spreading these establishment lies. So let me go through a few of these critiques, Lewis, and we'll see if any of them sort of hold water or make sense to us. Number one, you hardly cover Bernie. That was a critique. We hardly talk about him, and now I'm just saying it's over for Bernie. We've done, I went back and looked it up, a minimum of 22 stories over the last less than 1 month about Bernie Sanders. We do a 1-hour show, which when you remove breaks is a 45-minute show a day. And we did 22 stories, either exclusively or partially about Bernie Sanders, at minimum. There are some I know that I'm missing in my count here. So the idea, Lewis, that we're not covering Bernie, we've been covering Bernie from the beginning when he was polling 3%.
And there may very well be more Hillary Clinton stories than Bernie stories, but I would like to point out that most of those are negative and are very critical of Hillary Clinton. And so these, what we're dealing here with are people that will casually watch 1 or 2 of our videos every once in a while and then pretend they know what our views are and get the general idea of our program. This is really the same as one of those conservatives who pretends to know all about climate change, yet never does any of the research or looks into it at all. You're no different from that person.
Very good point. Then next, you hardly root for Bernie. Lewis has been clearly a Bernie supporter for months. I have clearly been a Bernie supporter for months and months. We've done comparisons between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton. I've made it abundantly clear that Bernie is far more progressive and that I am far more progressive than Hillary Clinton, and I voted for Bernie Sanders in Massachusetts. So saying we hardly root for him, this is a program where we're trying to bring a fact-based analysis, and there's been no secret made, Lewis, that while I am not a Bernie or bust person, I will vote for Hillary Clinton if she is the nominee over the Republican options. How can anyone say we haven't been clear in our support of Bernie?
The problem is that some people are just blinded by their bias. What are you going to do about those people? They see things, they don't really see reality, they don't see facts. They just see what they want to see, and we can't do anything about that.
Another comment was the Bernie or bust thing. David, it's Bernie or bust, why don't you get it? I don't subscribe to that, okay? And I subscribe to the undeniable reality that Hillary Clinton is too conservative on many issues. Hillary Clinton has ties to Wall Street that I don't like. Hillary Clinton has a neoconservative foreign policy that is far closer to many Republicans than it is to Bernie Sanders or a true progressive point of view. But I'm not voting for Donald Trump, and I'm not voting for Ted Cruz or Paul Ryan or whoever. And on balance, I subscribe to the Ted Kennedy approach of incrementalism and not saying, hey, if it's not going to be my preferred person, burn it all down. I subscribe to, if there's someone that will make some better decisions, then whoever it is that's over there on the far right, that's the person I subscribe to. Now, that's a matter of opinion, Lewis, but to say, David, because you're not Bernie or bust, you're not giving us the right analysis or the right data, I reject that completely. And then the other comment there was that Obama didn't start picking up delegates until June, and that Obama did worse in New York than Bernie Sanders did. That's true. Hillary Clinton won New York in 2008 against President Obama, 139 to 93 in terms of the delegate count. And Hillary Clinton won 2 days ago against Bernie Sanders in New York, 139 to 106 in New York. So it is indeed mathematically true that Obama did worse than Bernie in New York and eventually was the nominee. That doesn't prove anything. I still maintain, Lewis, that our analysis has just been a realistic analysis. And the worst of all the comments is when people write to me and they say, David, the problem is people like you aren't just rallying behind Bernie even now. My job here is not to cheerlead in a way that is going to make the audience think something that isn't the reality. But I would take it a step further, Lewis. When you hear me say, this is an unlikely scenario for Bernie Sanders to clinch the nomination, don't get mad at me because I'm discouraging people. Go out and vote, because we know that the higher the voter turnout, the more likely the more progressive candidate is to win. If you hear me say the mathematical path for Bernie is not a likely one, prove me wrong, so to speak, by going out and voting rather than saying that I am the problem because I'm presenting math. So, Lewis, I'll open it up to you now.
I'll keep this quick. If facts, truth, and reality are not your thing, don't watch our program. And if you want to live in a fantasy world, don't turn the TV on and stay off the internet.
I couldn't say it better. I mean, this is not a show that is a pro-Hillary shilling show. We've been abundantly clear that Bernie Sanders is the progressive candidate. We've been incredibly critical of Hillary Clinton. But this is also not a show that's just going to pretend, as I saw some people do yesterday, doing mathematical gymnastics to show how there's nothing concerning at all going on for Bernie Sanders' path to the White House, that it's all, listen, this all makes sense, and Bernie Sanders outperformed Obama in New York, and it's all going to be great for Bernie. We're presenting you with what we see as the mathematical case that's going on here. The way that you can prove us wrong is just go out and vote and make something else happen. Okay, let's talk about what's going on with the $20 bill. The big headline yesterday, after months of speculation about Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, the big news was that Harriet Tubman is going to be placed on the front of the $20 bill. There was initially some thought that Harriet Tubman, the civil rights era leader, Underground Railroad facilitator, really a true American hero, there was speculation she might replace Alexander Hamilton on the $10 bill. And unbeknownst to me, Lewis, Hamilton had a lot of big fans who got in touch with Jack Lew at the Treasury and said, don't take Hamilton off of the $10 bill. The reason initially it looked like it was going to be the $10 bill is, you might remember, the $20 bill was somewhat recently redesigned. I don't remember exactly how many years ago now. And the $10 bill was up for redesign sooner. So the idea was that's the time to work in someone new, maybe a woman, which we have not had on paper currency, with a couple of special issue exceptions that I'll tell you about. But actually, because of the blowback, it is going to be Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. Now, the headlines, Lewis, were Andrew Jackson is being replaced on the $20 bill. This is kind of true. He's being replaced on the front of it, but he is being moved to the back of it. And there are real questions about whether he should be on our currency at all, because as you probably have heard, Lewis, Andrew Jackson was a slave owner, and the idea of having Harriet Tubman on the same bill as former slave owner Andrew Jackson may be a little off-putting to some people. And Andrew Jackson was also responsible for some of the most genocidal, anti-Native American rhetoric of the time. So a lot of real questions about whether it even makes sense to keep Andrew Jackson on the 20 at all. Ben Carson coming out and saying he doesn't like this move. And where do you have to be, Lewis, mentally, to come out and say, I am against putting Harriet Tubman on our currency, and actually going and doing media appearances, proactively saying you don't like it. This just continues to confirm to us the sort of bizarre and odd nature of Ben Carson.
Yeah, Ben Carson is just one of those don't change anything type of guys. What we can do is he wants to change things that have been changed. He wants to set us back, I don't know how many years. That's what Ben Carson wants. I am a fan of this. I think this is a good move. I don't see the point of having two people on the same bill, but I don't know a lot about Jackson. What I do know is that putting these two people on the same bill is a strange dichotomy.
I am not very concerned or even interested that generally in changes to U.S. currency, but it's obviously time that we have someone that is a woman on U.S. currency, on paper currency. Women make up more than 50% of our country. We've had women around in this country since day one, and we have 100% men on our bills. I do think that this makes sense. A lot of angry comments on the internet from anti-feminists and men's rights activists saying, why would you go out there and look specifically for a woman? That doesn't make any sense, arguing that you're sort of choosing people based on their genitalia. There are thousands of worthy people that you could make a case should be on our currency. Since we were looking for one, isn't it fair to say, Lewis, why not have one woman there? And it is hard to imagine a better choice than Harriet Tubman.
I see no reason why we shouldn't have looked specifically for a woman to put on paper currency. We had Sacagawea on the dollar coin. And are those even around anymore? I don't know, but there's no problem.
Yeah, those are still around. There was Helen Keller on the back of the Alabama quarter in 2003. There's the Susan B. Anthony dollar coins, which a lot of people may be familiar with. There's been some commemorative coins. And Martha Washington was on the dollar silver certificate in the 1880s and 1890s. But essentially, that's it.
Was Sacagawea on a dollar coin as well?
1999 to recently, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, sure. No problem with actually trying to find a woman to put on a paper bill. I don't see a problem with that.
We'll take a break. Back after this from Las Vegas, Nevada.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is David McCormick. David, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member, getting the bonus show and all of the other great member benefits. You can, of course, join David by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership. Here's something I want to check in with the audience about, Lewis, very quickly. We've been thinking about for May, or late May, early June, doing a membership special where we will do custom logo USB drives with the David Pakman Show logo and maybe the URL, one on each side. And I've started looking into pricing on these, and I actually don't know what size thumb drive would make this an attractive promo. I mean, I know that at this point, a 2 or 4 gig thumb drive is not really that great of a thing. I've been looking at pricing. They can get really expensive, up around 64 gigs or 128 gigs. So what I'm asking the audience for, Lewis, is feedback about what size thumb drive would feel like a cool thing to get for free with the David Pakman Show membership, especially with people wanting to move around big video files and whatnot. I just don't think a 2 or 4 gig thumb drive is really going to cut it at this point.
If I would be totally satisfied if one were coming my way with an 8 to 16 gig.
8 to 16. Okay. So let me know. We're thinking about this for late May, early June, and I'm already talking with some vendors. By the way, if you have a vendor that you would recommend for custom logo USB thumb drives, let me know about that as well. But send me your thoughts. If you are thinking about getting a membership and you would be enticed by a free USB thumb drive with the David Pakman Show logo on it, tell me what size would make sense to you. I have a recommendation today, Lewis, that I read years ago, And I assumed I had recommended it at some point, and someone emailed me last week saying, David, have you read this book? And I actually have not recommended it. And the book is A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. I read it years ago. It's from 2005. It is still highly, highly relevant. It is a sort of popular science book, and it explains a lot of the areas of science that often are not that accessible to laymen. And it explains them in really clear language so that the general public can have a better understanding of a bunch of historically scientific concepts. They talk about the universe in the book, atoms and subatomic particles and how to understand that. It looks at the history of geology, the history of biology. It traces life from its first appearance to modern humans. It looks at the development of modern Homo sapiens. And you'll remember, Lewis, not long ago I recommended the book Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. I would actually suggest checking out, if you haven't already read Sapiens, check out A Short History of Nearly Everything first, because that'll give you a sort of broader perspective of a lot of scientific concepts. And then go to Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari to really drill down specifically on the development of Homo sapiens in a more detailed way. Bill Bryson is just fantastic, Lewis.
It does sound pretty interesting. And as someone who is aware of a lot of this scientific stuff and can even understand it in more advanced terms, would you still recommend this book for those people?
Yeah, I would, because it places everything in a sort of historical context, and it sort of gives you a timeline of when different scientific discoveries were made. So, for example, even if you have a good understanding of fossils and the fossilized layers of rock on Earth, as well as astronomy, it's interesting to see how those two areas of science came about in terms of a timeline, what interrelations there are. So I really would recommend it, even if you have a more detailed scientific understanding of some of the individual concepts. And again, the book is A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. I have an update I want to talk to you about involving the Flint, Michigan water crisis. I've been saying for months that the Flint water crisis should be a criminal case, and it finally is. 2 state regulators and a city employee have now been charged with official misconduct, evidence tampering, and other offenses over the lead contamination that was hugely alarming to the country. It brought cries of structural and institutional racism from some, and it is now a criminal case, as it should be. State Attorney General Bill Schwett said yesterday, "This is a road back to restoring faith and confidence in all Michigan families in their government." He said these are just the first charges in the disaster and that there could be more forthcoming. And the big question, Lewis, has been about the Michigan governor, and nothing really specifically said other than everything is on the table at this point. I don't know of anyone who really thinks we're going to see charges against Governor Rick Snyder here, who didn't even acknowledge the problem until last fall. Even though tests revealed high levels of lead in children for a very long time. And as we know, heavy metals like lead can cause low IQ in children, behavioral problems, etc. If I had to guess, these 3 individuals, and I want to be clear, I've said this should be a criminal case all along, these may be scapegoats here for misdeeds by higher-ups.
Yeah, and David, the only way I like to consume my heavy metals are audibly. Wasn't there a bunch of people saying that this could, that even some people at the EPA might be partially held responsible for some of what happened?
Yeah, that was suggested. I mean, good luck imagining any kind of charges there. That seems even less likely than charges against Rick Snyder. One person who is charged here is a former district engineer who is named Michael Prisby, and they are charged with misconduct, conspiracy, tampering with test results, and misdemeanor violations of clean water laws. These are felonies. Some of these are felonies, and total it could lead to 4 to 5 years in prison. I don't know. I want to feel really good about this, but everything I've been reading about the combination of charges and the way it's been carried out is making me feel like this is at best a sort of symbolic gesture.
Most likely, it should still be happening. Of course, I'd like to see this go all the way to the top. And I have a really hard time believing that this is actually going to restore faith in government for the people in Michigan and Flint. If I were living there, that would be gone for the rest of my life, no matter what happens here.
Well, last year and last week, most recently, we interviewed water economist David Zetland, and he told us a year and a half ago when we interviewed him, the biggest question mark or potential problem around water is that of governance and regulation. And of course, cronyism, corruption, and these types of decisions that we saw in Flint, Michigan are exactly what David Zetland described. And there's no doubt that when you talk about water, when you see the worldwide, national, and regional issues around water, this needs to be an issue that is thought of as a top national security issue. And for whatever reason, I mean, if you want to be alive, you need to have water, and ideally clean water. It's not taken nearly as seriously as it should be until it really happens within your municipality, as we're seeing here. And this should be banging on the walls and screaming hysteria, because we're talking about water here.
But isn't that the American way? I mean, don't deal with a problem until it's too late. Just keep it suppressed. And I don't know why. It seems it's not just water. In so many different situations, this is exactly how it goes down.
Send me your thoughts about this. I'm on Twitter at dpacman, and Lewis is on Twitter at lewismotomedy. And of course, support independent media by voting with your dollars through something we call membership. You get some great benefits as well. Sign up at davidpacman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Back in 2011, Google jumped into the broadband world by launching Google Fiber. And we talked about it pretty extensively then, and we talked about the really positive impact from the point of view of consumers, not from the point of view of big broadband companies. The positive impact that the introduction of Google Fiber has had on the cities where it has become available. It has actually increased competition. It has held prices lower for broadband, and it has really caused a problem for some of the big broadband providers. Now Google has announced even bigger plans. It wants to start beaming wireless broadband directly into homes all over the United States. The caveat is that Google hasn't yet figured out exactly how to make the technology work. And what they would go after is what's called the last mile problem, which is typically addressed by the very slow process, and a very expensive process actually, of stringing a web of wires directly into homes. So as you can imagine, Lewis, in a big city, you run broadband all the way into a big building or a block with high population density. And it really does pay off to wire all the way into individual buildings because of the population density, and one block gives you a significant amount of revenue. In more rural areas, and this is why when we see municipal broadband, we tend to see it in more rural areas, it can be worthwhile financially for the cable provider, the broadband provider, to get wiring sort of into a neighborhood, but the population density can be so low that it doesn't really make sense to start wiring down to the individual block or building or home level. Many small towns don't even have buildings with numerous apartments or higher population density. So the concept here is to go that last mile, as it's called, and sometimes it's more than a mile, sometimes it's less than a mile. You can beam the broadband service wirelessly. And as I mentioned, the technology has not yet been figured out 100%, but the idea would be you connect existing wireless towers to existing fiber lines with with a variety of wireless technologies. The idea is fantastic. And again, Lewis, the big legacy broadband providers are not liking this one bit, which is the number one sign that this would be really great for consumers.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're in a position where it's really up to a company that, like Google, to try and compete with the major telecom companies. There aren't municipalities all over the country could be doing this on their own if they wanted to. It's just that somehow the telecom companies keep convincing them that they shouldn't, and that for some reason it's better to have to deal with Comcast or whoever. So good
And
for
to
Google.
be really
I hope it
clear,
works.
to be really clear on what you're saying, Lewis, the municipalities can do it broadly speaking, but typically when they enter into an agreement with a company like Comcast, they are agreeing not to do municipal broadband, and if they do, they would be in breach of that contract with Comcast or whoever. So before you ever make a deal with the devil, so to speak, sure, you can do municipal broadband. Once you do a deal with a company like Comcast or Time Warner or whoever, very often that contract says you can't do that anymore.
That's right. And that deal with the devil is really appropriate here. There are a few things I can think of that are closer to the devil than these giant telecom companies.
Google Fiber is currently or soon to be available in Atlanta, Austin, Charlotte, Huntsville, Kansas City, Nashville, Provo, Utah, Raleigh, Durham, Salt Lake City, San Antonio, and San Francisco, and future cities already being added to that list. I don't know, Lewis, I kind of like dealing with Comcast. I mean, what better than an outrageous monthly cost for relatively slow internet service, incompetent tech support, with individuals with a limited grasp of the English language, and the requirement to set aside 90 minutes if you have to call them for any reason, even a simple billing request. It really builds character and strengthens the individual.
And don't forget the fact that it's almost impossible to cancel your subscription.
I actually, to Comcast's credit, I have been able to cancel service when I've moved relatively easily, but when you're moving, I think that's when they go at you the least aggressively, because after all, you're not going to be in their service area anymore. Okay, let's talk quickly about what I'm doing here in Las Vegas. A lot of emails yesterday from people saying, what's going on? What exactly am I doing here? Some people wondering if I'm in an aviary based on my background. And really funny, Lewis, we have a clip. Somebody caught a bird flying by behind me. And it's really funny. Let's just play that clip real quick. I didn't even notice this. Sometimes I saw some birds here, but apparently they were part of the show yesterday. Really rational. And he's made some fascinating comments about the state of the current Republican primary race. And it turns out he...
Okay, there was the bird.
So there it is. That's interesting, isn't it?
David, that might be the most interesting thing I've seen all week. It's that bird had quite some speed to it. It looked very nimble and graceful, and I hope it found some crumbs to nibble on.
So I'm here at a conference called Mass Torts Made Perfect. This is a conference organized by Levin Papantonio law firm, of course, of Mike Papantonio, who is the host of Ring of Fire. And Mike Papantonio has been a friend of the show for a very, very long time. Most of the conference centers around different cases involving big corporations who have done not good things. This is sometimes issues related to big pharma. This is sometimes issues related to consumer products, etc. The conference is very, very interesting. The material is very, very dense. Yesterday, I sat in on a bunch of panels about how some of these cases are put together, how the research is done, especially when big corporations often want to stonewall anyone they identify to be a potential plaintiff in a case against them. It is fascinating to see how this entire world works. A lot of our media friends are here. Sam Cedar from the Majority Report is here. Farron Cousins and the entire team from Ring of Fire are here. Abby Martin from the Empire Files, formerly of RT, is here, and we got a great chance to talk yesterday. A lot of ideas about progressive media are being discussed here, and it is It's really, really dense material that is being discussed in terms of a lot of the litigation and whatnot, but it is very, very interesting to be here. And I will have some more stories on today's bonus show. So make sure to sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. I have an interesting story actually involving Steve Wynn. We recently did a story about casino entrepreneur Steve Wynn, and I have a story about him to tell on today's bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I never liked former baseball pitcher Curt Schilling on a personal level, but I was kind of able to get behind him when he was pitching for the Boston Red Sox in Major League Baseball. But since retiring, he's really said a lot of bogus right-wing nonsense, other than campaigning for George W. Bush, which was bad enough, other than supporting John McCain in 2008, which was bad enough. He has stated his opposition to same-sex marriage. Back in August, he was suspended for a social media post that compared radical Muslims to Nazis. Last month, he suggested that Hillary Clinton, quote, should be buried under a jail somewhere if she gave classified information on hundreds, if not thousands, of emails on a public server after what happened to General Petraeus, end quote. Sort of gives you an overview of Curt Schilling. And recently, he's been an analyst for the sports network ESPN. But he's now been just totally fired. No more suspensions. He has now been fired after some Facebook posts about North Carolina's famous, now infamous transgender bathroom bill. He reshared a post which showed an overweight man wearing a wig and women's clothing with parts of the t-shirt cut out to expose his breasts. And it said, "Let him in to the restroom with your daughter, or else you're a narrow-minded, judgmental, unloving, racist bigot who needs to die." And to that, Curt Schilling added, "A man is a man, no matter what they call themselves. I don't care what they are, who they sleep with. Men's room was designed for penis, women's not so much. Now you need laws telling us differently? Pathetic." ESPN, as I mentioned, has fired Curt Schilling. They put out a statement saying ESPN is an inclusive company. Curt Schilling has been advised that his conduct was unacceptable and his employment with ESPN has been terminated. On WEEI radio, which is a Boston, very, very well-known Boston sports radio station, Curt Schilling said, "I replied to the post. I didn't post that." Of course, there are screen captures, including those by Outsports.com, which show that Curt Schilling did actually share it and added his own comment. Well, I guess before I move on to my broader thing with this, Louis, what's your thought about Curt Schilling and his post? And I'm really just sick of Curt Schilling.
Yeah, it became clear quite a while ago that he was a nut, and you can't help but root for him if he's pitching on your team. We discussed how Tom Brady of the New England Patriots, the football team, American football that is, seemed to be friendly with Donald Trump, and he had a Donald Trump hat, and at one point seemed to give a Donald Trump endorsement. And I thought to myself, I don't really care. They're golf buddies, whatever. The stuff Curt Schilling has been doing is just despicable compared to that.
There's this broader question, which you're now getting to, of athletes and celebrities and finding out their politics and whether it affects you or it doesn't. And I don't have a specific rule or rubric or barometer. You just sort of know when you hear it or see it. Mel Gibson, for example, I find absolutely despicable. I have not seen a Mel Gibson movie since his insane anti-Semitic rants. Tom Brady from the New England Patriots. You're more or less right. It's not clear he really is voting for Trump. It does seem like they're golf buddies. It doesn't seem like Tom Brady is even necessarily that political. That sort of impacted me less. Curt Schilling, on the other hand, who also did very, very well pitching for a team that I love and follow and have been following for a very, very long time, you just sort of get a feeling when you read about this stuff. And I don't think it's hypocritical necessarily to just sort of have a general view that you'll just analyze the athlete or celebrity or public figure or whatever and see how you feel about what they say on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah, everyone is going to have that threshold or tipping point based on what's said. Yeah, Kurt Schilling, he crossed my threshold a long time ago.
Speaking of transgender bathroom bills, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said earlier today that transgender people should be allowed to use whichever bathroom they prefer. This was during a town hall that was broadcast on NBC. Trump said that North Carolina's anti-LGBT bathroom measure, which has hurt North Carolina economically, wasn't necessary, and it sought to address a problem that wasn't really a big issue. Donald Trump saying, quote, "North Carolina did something that was very strong, and they're paying a big price. There's a lot of problems. You leave it the way it is. There have been very few complaints the way it is. People go, they use the bathroom they feel is appropriate. There has been so little trouble. And the problem with what happened in North Carolina is the strife and the economic punishment that they are taking." Completely different position from that of Ted Cruz. Kasich said he would not have signed that bill into law, but he still seems to lean a little more in the direction of the Ted Cruz direction. This is fascinating to me because those people who are supporting Donald Trump, they would not support basically any other candidate who had these positions were it not for the cult of personality around Trump. We've talked about Donald Trump and infrastructure spending, which infrastructure spending generally is not something Republicans want to talk about. They want to reduce government spending. Donald Trump has said that almost everything that Planned Parenthood does is good, although he claims not to agree with the abortion part, although I don't even know that I believe that. It seems like a crafted political position. The Bernie Sanders position on foreign policy and non-interventionist foreign policy with regard to Middle East dictators is essentially the same position as that of Donald Trump. And now the right-wingers, Lewis, particularly the evangelicals and religious right-wingers, they completely are opposed to Trump's position on the transgender bathroom bill, which is indistinguishable from my position, I should remind you.
Yeah, I'm glad Trump is saying this because many Trump followers seem to be quite malleable. It's easy for Trump to convince them of whatever he's saying. And in this particular case, Trump is right. And I hope that he's changing some minds about this ridiculous type of legislation that we're seeing pop up.
After he said this, there were some comments that this is Trump starting to move towards the middle to position himself for the national race. I disagree completely. Donald Trump has been taking positions that should be completely repulsive to his base for a very, very long time. It seems to have absolutely no impact. And every time this happens, I believe it when Trump says he could shoot people on Fifth Avenue for no reason and not lose any supporters. And as I've mentioned before, that's not praise of Trump supporters. That's an indictment of the fact that they are very, very low information with regard to Donald Trump's positions and their positions and how they are completely incongruous. And I wouldn't be cheering that my supporters would support me even if I shot innocent people. So this only helps to illuminate, number one, the absurdity of Donald Trump even running in the way that he's running, and number two, the lack of information in the average Trump supporter. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here is a voicemail that we got, sort of continuing to follow up about my segment yesterday on Bernie Sanders. Take a listen to this.
Hey there, this is David, a member from California. Lewis has finally proven that he's among the 80% that are incompetent at their job. He's a liberal podcast commentator who thinks that Trump might be a better choice for president than Hillary Clinton, which totally proves that he's incompetent. Anyway, David, you have a chance to prove you're not incompetent by at least mentioning the fact that Bernie Sanders' campaign manager is talking about using superdelegates to push Bernie over the nomination threshold at the convention, even though he doesn't have the most pledged delegates. If you don't mention it, you're incompetent too, David. Bye.
Yeah, I don't know that it's a question of competence. I mean, of course, the Bernie Sanders campaign is going to make the case that they will figure out a way to get this nomination, whether it's pledged delegates, primaries, caucuses, open primaries, closed primaries, or super delegates at the convention. I don't know that mentioning or not mentioning that the Bernie Sanders campaign says they can win would make me competent or incompetent, Lewis.
No, that's their job. It is the job. They would be incompetent if they said, I think we're going to lose. Let's just give this up. So let's use some logic here. And I didn't say I think Donald Trump would be the better candidate or might be the better candidate. What I said was that on many issues, Trump is more progressive than Hillary Clinton. That is a fact. I also said that it would just be fascinating to see what happens as kind of a social experiment.
Yeah, let's not get confused here. And to be clear, whatever Lewis says, I have made it very, very clear that if Hillary Clinton is the nominee, I will absolutely support Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. Just think, just only focused, just even for a second, on the Supreme Court nominations. Donald Trump has already said that, I believe it was the Heritage Foundation or the American Enterprise Institute, Heritage, I think, would be providing the list from which Donald Trump would choose Supreme Court nominees. I mean, it's bogus. So to be very clear, I do not think for a second that Donald Trump is a more logical choice for president than Hillary Clinton. On the bonus show, the world's oldest dog dies at age 30. Whole Foods is suing the gay pastor that we mentioned in yesterday's bonus show, and I have some great stories from the conference here in Las Vegas, Nevada. DavidPakman.com/membership is the way to get instant access to the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.